Hi, Elaine here. Today you'll learn how to use Adobe Photoshop Smart Object enabled files inside Affinity Photo. There are literally thousands of Adobe Photoshop Smart Object enabled files available online, many of them available completely free. Here's the one that I've selected. The link for this is in the description, so feel free to follow along. Now it contains 5 versions of a mockup, each one slightly different. I think we'll use number 5 here. By default, Affinity Photo has no clue what to do with Photoshop Smart Object. If we look at what we have in this particular file, over across on the Layers panel, the first layer is actually turned off. When I click that to select it, you can see white selection handles and a blue frame on the image. To actually see the contents, you need to toggle on visibility for that layer. And what is in that layer is exactly the same as is on the screen of the iPad. Next, we have a group, and inside the group, we also have the screen of the iPad. That is inside another group, but you'll notice that all of these layers are pixel based. Then we have a background colour, which is a fill layer, and then we have the background of the image. But again, everything is pixel based. And that is not what we need if we're going to edit this. Now, the reason that it's doing that is by default, Affinity Photo is not enabled to handle smart objects. But we can make it so. So I'm going to close that file, don't need to save it. Go up to Affinity Photo and down to Settings. And inside the settings, in General, you'll find an Other section. The only thing that's enabled there by default is the refining of the HEIC depth maps, and the one underneath that is Import PSD, which is Photoshop files, Smart Objects where possible. That needs to be enabled for the rest of this demo to work. So ensuring it is enabled, then open the file again. Exactly the same file, but now it's quite different. Although, again, the first layer is the screen, and again it's turned off, we can toggle that on and off. The difference this time is it's an embedded document, so it's a smart object. The next one, which was the screen, if I open that up, you can see here that the grouping that we have on that screen is actually the perspective. Then we have the screen behind it, so if I toggle off what's showing, you can see the white screen behind it. Then again we have a fill layer, which is a background colour, and finally we have the background. Now if you're using a file that you've downloaded from the internet, do read the instructions if there are any, and make sure that you actually do walk through the layers panel so you know what you've got. Another consideration is not all the Photoshop features that work perfectly in Photoshop actually ripple through. One of the issues we have here is this plant. A couple of the leaves of that are actually behind the mockup. Now, it's easy enough to fix with a mask, but it doesn't look like that in Photoshop. It's working perfectly in Photoshop, so that's why you need to be aware of it. All right, so how do you go about editing this? Well, first of all, you've got that layer, the one at the top. Although it's toggled off, you can double click that and you're now editing an embedded file, and it indicates that at the top that it's an embedded file. Now I have a screenshot from my iPad, so I'm just going to drag and drop that into the window. Now obviously it's far too big, so I will zoom out so I can see the edges of it and make it smaller so it fits the area that we are working with. And move it up into place. I'm actually going to tweak this fractionally, just bring it up a little bit at the bottom. I'm not concerned that the doc's missing. It's for demonstration purposes only. But what I've done is put that in there. You don't even have to close that embedded file for your main file to update. So there is the iPad screen now on the iPad. Another change I'm going to make over here, because it happens to be available in this file, is the background colour. And this is a fill layer, and I can tweak this so the background, the top half of the image, changes. So you can have it a green, I could cool it down with a blue colour, or I could warm it up by taking it back over here and then up into the orange area and make it nice and warm. Now I'm showing that because it happens to be in this file. What features you will have available will depend on the file that you've downloaded. That's why it's important to check through it and see what options you actually have. If you wanted to add that option yourself, you could do, but that is a completely different demo. So we've managed to change it at this point. We've managed to get our iPad screen onto the mockup. And you can, of course, go back to the embedded file and make changes in there. So I could actually move this up so you can see the dock. and show you that, take it back and actually turn it off. So we could go back to the original imagery that was on that iPad. Closing that embedded file, you can see this is what we now have. Obviously, no good with their imagery on it. Let's go back and enable our iPad screen. Now, at this point, it's probably wise to save the file. The option to overwrite the original Photoshop file is another option in the settings, and that again is disabled by default. For safety's sake, I keep it that way. So when I save this file, it will actually save it as an Affinity Photo file. So up to File and down to Save, and even though it has a name and it is already saved as a Photoshop file, it will prompt me to save it as an Affinity Photo file. So saving it into my data folder. And just to show you, despite the fact I've saved it, and despite the fact that it's now an Affinity Photo file, we can still go in here and make changes. Any changes that we need, and those changes ripple through. There is a reason that I am showing you that. So I'm going to go back in yet again and put my iPad on it. Obviously the file has been changed since we saved it, so I'll quickly save it again and now close the file. You wouldn't think the next thing would be an issue, but it is. Opening up that Affinity Photo format copy of that file and doing exactly what we have just done, which is go into the screen at the top layer and again toggle off the iPad screen. It didn't update. Yes, I think it should as well. But the fact is it doesn't, and there is a reason for that. This layer at the very top called Screen, and if I toggle open the screen in here and the second layer called Screen, when it's an Adobe Photoshop file, these two layers are clones of each other. You make changes to one, it ripples through to the other. Even when you save it as an Affinity Photo file, the same still happens. You've just seen that. But as soon as you close the file and reopen it, that's the Affinity Photo file, that link is lost. So this top layer we now don't need at all because it's doing us no good whatsoever. So I can actually delete that. What I'd need to do to make changes to this now is make the changes to this second layer, which is inside the screen group here. Going into there and toggling on and off whatever I want, and it will update. So that is just something that you need to be aware of. So if you've edited something, saved it, closed it down, come back and you think this is not behaving itself, you may need to look through your file and find the actual layers that contain the artwork you now need to edit. There could well be other layers in there that are no longer linked to those layers. Again, this is not an issue unless you're using a Photoshop file. Next time, I'll share how to create your own completely Affinity-based mockups. Photoshop not required. Now let's have a quick recap. Adobe Smart Objects are supported in Affinity Photo, but you do need to enable the option in the settings though, which you'll find at Settings General, Import PSD Smart Objects where possible. Then you need to check what's in the file in terms of duplicate embeds and also other features like background colours that you are easily able to change. Then you can edit the smart objects and save your file, and I would recommend saving it as an Affinity Photo file. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and see you next time.